I think poetry slams are more for the audience and the poet, because they're more about adding an energy and adding adding some interest to outside eyes, because a poet at a poetry slam already is involved and already wants to be there, already wants to listen to it.
When you put slam onto any kind of event, instantly a non-poetry audience is going to see that and be like, oh, so it's not like regular poetry, whatever that means. And yeah, I think like the whole competitive element, that is all kind of a quirk to get the audience more engaged in poetry.
It is an audience event, and that does alter the nature of what you do. There are things that I write and that I'm very proud of that I wouldn't dare do at a slam, because I know they're not slam material. It's not that kind of an entertainment event that I could do those things there.
One of the best things about slams is that they can be a showcase of fantastic talent. The Scottish Nationals this year, normally I hate being first in a slam, but I was placed first, and it was great because it meant that for the entire first round I could relax and watch the other poets, and it was one of the best nights of entertainment ever because everyone was brilliant. And so I think slams are a way of bringing together poets who are all really passionate. You know, there's something at stake, even if it's just, you know, a rubber duck. You know, everyone wants to win that slam. And so you often get poets performing at their best.
It's good for individual poems, and like it's really good to get feedback on individual pieces and poems, but it can be really detrimental to some poets who maybe like, you know, aren't overly comfortable with the manufactured competition of it. Obviously, if there's if the stakes are really high, then that can lead to a lot of like competition, a lot of nastiness, and a lot of that. So I don't like that.
I don't think that they're necessarily for the poets in that way, because I mean, I've spent so much time being like anxious about slams and like, oh, I really want to win this, and you get yourself so wrapped up. And so I think while they can be good, they can also be a way of making poets really nervous over nothing when maybe they could be spending that energy making new material.
This ceaseless whirring, ticking, worrying. It's a blade, a machine, a guilt trip. Take me down, down. Take me down under the water. Take me water under. Okay, break the spell. The little one. Use the silly shard to poke at the boys whose voices are too loud underwater. Crystallize this fear or bite your cheek. I can hurt me. I can hurt me. I can hurt me. I won't. But I can.
I like to think poetry slams are for the audience, to be honest. I think that if you just want to go and share poetry, there are many places to do that. I definitely view poetry slams as for the audience.
If you've got to say it's either for the audience or for the poet, I've got to choose one. I'm going to say it's for the audience. It's exciting, it's accessible, it's a way of viewing poetry you might have not seen it before, because slam poetry and performance poetry are very conflated ideas. So some people might see slam poetry as a genre of performance, political, or poetry with some kind of theme, where it's not. That is just what spoken word is. But by going to slam poetry and going, actually, all spoken word poetry is like that, suddenly you realise what you thought slam poetry was is actually just spoken word. It's just an accentuated, competitive version of it. So I think it's great for that purpose as well.
So I personally think that poetry slams are for the audience. I think there are not as many events where you would get such a huge array of poets and the diversity of styles as well. I think it's quite difficult to go to a particular night reading showcase in, say, your local pub or bar or whatever, and find the same range of poetry. And I think it is really important to be able to see that range of poetry, so that if you've got people who are not really into it, or they're just coming to watch a friend or something, they think, oh, actually, there is a huge way in here, and any one of these things could be for me.
I think in terms of the most good that poetry slams do, it's for the audience. I think a huge amount of good is done getting people invested and involved and going along and hearing poems they wouldn't otherwise have. Of course, any chance to go up and perform and to be pushed for an artist is a real positive. And it's true that for some people, having that extra competitive edge is really positive for their writing. people kind of have the competitive side of them comes out, and they think, oh, I've got to finish this poem before the next slam, or I've got to practice it really hard before the next slam. That's really positive too. So of course, anything where people have a platform to share their work and to speak their truth is good. But I think in terms of the format itself, it's really good for audiences.
I want to see a film where Samuel L. Jackson plays Sherlock Holmes. Ice Cube can be his hype man, Dr. Watson and Morgan Freeman can play Mycroft. The film will be called either Sherlock Homie or Holmes Boy. I want the scene where Sherlock leaves 221B Baker Street to get a 453 to Elephant and Castle and spends that whole bus getting talking to a 10-year-old black kid because that's the only person who understands him. I want a scene where young Sherlock puts on a deerstalker for the first time so people stop touching his hair. I want a scene with a rap battle with a cameo appearance by Stormzy, and I want a scene where Ice Cube gets pissed off at Scotland Yard and yells, "Fuck the police." I also want a scene where Samuel L. Jackson, Sherlock Holmes, gets really, really angry and yells, "Elementary motherfucker, do you understand it?"
I'd say that a lot of poets go into slams for recognition and validation. And yeah, also a need to, express your art, but I think it's for the poets and it gets people in the door.
I think I would say it's largely for the poets. I think a lot of poets, are very focused on the idea of slams, on the idea of kind of being good competitive poets. So I think there is there's a cachet to it within the kind of the poetry community of, okay, well that person won, the Roundhouse Slam, or they won, Hammer and Tongue or whatever. So there's a kind of, there's a kind of sort of cachet among poets of who is, deemed to be a good poet that way.
I would say the poets, because recently I've been thinking, well, maybe I'll set up my own night in Bath, like those crazy dreams you have when you're about to graduate. And my thought is, because Bath Bar's got a course for performance poetry, it's where a lot of people have first heard of it. They don't just come to it and then join in, they opt into a course. So opportunities for them to perform and better themselves are really helpful. So I think that I can see definitely how they benefit the poets. So I'd probably say they're more helpful to us. And I think that when you go to poetry, you go there because everybody wants to be heard. And as an audience member, I think you go there because you want to hear someone like you. So I think it's a conversation both ways, but I think the poet gets more out of it.
For an audience of people who are A, slammers, or B, who like watching slam poetry, I think that you tend to get a lot of people standing up and confirming those things you already thought. And I guess as a writer it shouldn't happen as much, but sometimes you get somebody and you go, oh, that's exactly what I thought, and you put it into perfect words, and that's beautiful, and I think people come to slams for that, but I think they would get that without the competitive element there anyway.
I think when an audience walks into a poetry space like a slam, they in a way become poets because they are evaluating the poetry and they're being they're involved in it. Slams are a very encompassing environment where the audience and the poet are all part of it. Poetry slams wouldn't exist without the poets, but they also wouldn't exist without the audience and the people who aren't generally poets outside of that room. So I think slams are for poets in that everyone in that space to some extent becomes a poet, or at least someone who's invested in poetry. But in terms of who benefits from them, the audience definitely benefit because they get this evening and experience and something they wouldn't normally get. But as a poet, I feel like slams have benefited me so much personally that I have to say, poets benefit the most.
If we can't learn to love our neighbour and we never talk to one another, I feel the beauty of big cities and multiculturalism is lost. With all these millions of stories waiting to be shared, but no one's ever listening. Where the city lights stay on all night and we all strive to get through our 9 to 5, but all these millions of stories are really waiting to collide as I wonder why I feel so empty and dead up to my neck in all this life. Excuse me, how are you? Silence and no response. I wish I could spin myself in candy floss to see a sweeter world. But every time I look up to see if anyone shares that tact, there's never anyone ever looking back. I was asked if I needed help repairing my barriers. For me, I said no. I spent years destroying them. Now I'm loving being free. In fact, let's break down yours with the conversation in my seat. On hearing this, they turned back to their TV. They flipped through the programming to find their favourite program so they could sit back in their armchair and continue to be programmed.
Are poetry slams for the people competing or for the people watching? I think it's a mixture of both. It's a combination of both.
Both, I think. I mean, the audience has different reasons why they decide to go, and so do the poets.
For who gains most out of poetry slams, I'd say audience and performers equally, to some extent, and sometimes audience are generally always going to get a really enjoyable night out of it. That's pretty certain. However, I didn't slam for about a year. I got really worried. Like when I started off in Glasgow, the only people I saw were really, really talented, and they were the ones off doing slams, and I was a bit apprehensive about joining into that side of the scene. But as soon as I did, I realised how much my performance improved when I had that little incentive of, oh, wouldn't it be good to be able to do another poem tonight? Wouldn't it be good to get the audience really going because they're into it tonight? That it really helped my performance. Like, you know, when I'm up on a stage, I'm not an artist, I'm a performer, I'm an entertainer, and I'm there to entertain. And when you get that sort of reaction you do at a poetry slam, that shows you that you're doing something right, or when you're doing something wrong, how to improve on it. So like, I think that, yeah, the audience is always going to have a good night at a good slam, but performers get a hell of a lot from it as well.
Some would say poetry is an acquired taste, but with poetry slams, it's easy to get people in there, get them hooked, because of the kind of the bar nature of it, the rowdy nature of it. That's what I like about poetry slams.
It does have a lot to do with trying out not necessarily new poems, but like poems that you are confident with, and just trying to sort of push as much power into them as possible and trying to get that and try and get that rawness back out of you, because when you're in a competition you get the adrenaline up a little bit, so it is a very exciting time, more so than just performing in an open mic, but also for the audience as well. Some will come there just to support their friends, but others will go there just to watch people like put their all into poetry, and I think it's a really good place to get that energy and that power that you might not necessarily see from an open mic night.
So I woke up to another set of terrorist threats, revealing some seriously questionable mindsets. Convinced me I might have to grab a bulletproof vest before taking my next test, and to avoid those challenging jokes, nah, not even in jest, and not to speak too loud because it is dangerous to protest. Just be happily repressed under constant duress. Remember, it's always best to express caution while the world outside is storming, while we're praying for a peaceful dawning, and while I'm baying for that one fine morning. To the sky I found myself calling. If I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, would it be my family that's mourning? Would it be my body in a casket laid? And would that prove worthy of adoring? If my blood was still gently pouring out, and I was laying in the street dead meat splayed out, and my mouth open wide like I'm yawning, would that image succeed in being flooring enough?
I think poetry slams very much benefit both the audience and the performer, but in very different ways. Obviously, yeah, as far as starting off introducing a friend to poetry, a slam is probably your best bet, because it is, again, bringing their A game. All the poets are going to be very good, and there is, again, a little bit of competitive, oh, who's going to win, which is very exciting. But I think in terms, it's very difficult to have like a poetry CV, for example, without like at least some kind of championship. And I think it makes it a lot easier to have something that you can write down as, I've actually achieved this. I mean, I've only won one slam, but I am constantly, you know, I have so many gigs that I am constantly at. Like I perform like maybe 3-4 times a week. And yeah, I think slams are very good for, in terms of like being able to say, I definitely did this, here is proof.
I think that slams can be a really good kind of way of promoting your work. So if you can say, oh, well, I've won this slam, this slam, this slam, this slam, people are going to go, okay, all right, I want to listen to this person, because obviously like they're popular in what they're doing, and I think that's really exciting. But I don't think that's what it is all about.
I think poets like to think it's more for the audience, but I think I, as a poet, gain a lot from doing a slam. I'll write a poem and I'll go, yeah, this is the best thing ever, and I'll go to a slam and I'll read it and I'll be like, nobody laughed, nobody, you know, I've done poems, really serious poems, people just laughed all the way through them. And it's quite good just to get a feel for, you know, what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, what goes well. So I think poets gain a lot from slams, but I think, yeah, maybe it's just the whole spectacle. It's for the audience and for the poets. I don't think it's for anyone. It's just coming together. We're going to shout poetry, and I think everyone really gains from that.
A big element of slams is for the audience. It's about generating that kind of energy and getting people really immersed and really involved. And feeling that their opinion counts as well. A lot of the time when the audience is judging, you know, they have a certain element of power which can be quite fun for them. I would hesitate to say though that it's more for the audience than the poet ever, because it really, you know, if you're performing at a slam and you're performing something that's highly charged with emotion, that can't really be commodified. That can't be ignored. So getting to do something difficult on stage and getting appreciated for it is a really big deal for poets.
I asked her, how is it over there? She said, Bray's still a shite hole. Grafton Street is still mad crowded, and the winding stair is still a secret softly kept on top of a bookshop. I asked her what she's doing over here, and her smile fell flat-footed false. With a studied nonchalance, she said, I'm just here getting something taken care of. It was the way she wrapped her arms around her stomach as she said it. I figured it out in those awful moments right after I should have. When I looked up, her eyes were shimmering like she had to be too strong for 13 broken heartbeats too long. She fought wars in those 4 seconds, but eventually a single tear slipped out the corner of her eye and glided down the side of her face like the lace of a parcel coming in tied. And then there was another one, and then the first shattering sob, and all I could do was hold her, give her somewhere safe to smash into, do my best to be fortress walls between her shaking form and every other person on this carriage who just one time couldn't mind their own business. Earthquake girl. Fault lines running through her future, caught in the aftershock of discovering that we had all lied to her, that actually all of the answers are wrong.